The Ohio-class guided missile submarine USS Michigan, one of the largest submarines in the world, nuclear-powered aircraft carrier Ronald Reagan, and more have already arrived at the southern port of Busan as part of a regularly scheduled deployment to the Western Pacific. Nuclear-armed North Korea did not conduct another missile test on October 10th, the founding anniversary of the Workers' Party. However, many are saying the October crisis and tensions still remain because of the joint military drill between South Korea and the United States this week, and 19th Party Congress of Chinese Communist Party starting on 18th. So there are key elements that might motivate the reclusive states to launch another missile. Pyongyang always reacts furiously to the arrival of the U.S. forces to the Korean Peninsula. As we have expected, North Korea is very sensitive to joint drills between Seoul and Washington, denouncing those measures and repeating threatening remarks. Will South Korea and the U.S. strong response to the North Korea's missile launch prevent another provocation from Kim Jong-un? On Peninsula 24, we'll delve into this question. So we have two experts for today's discussion in the studio. To my right, Park Hwee-rhak, the Dean of the Graduate School of Politics and Leadership at Kookmin University. Professor Park, thanks for joining us in the studio.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And to my left, the Research Fellow at Sejong Institute, Dr. Lee Seong-hyon. Dr. Lee, thanks for joining us in the studio.
Thank you for having me.
So, well, it's been a month. I mean, I'm not saying that I'm waiting for that, but it was the last time was September 15th, so North Korea's intermediate range, the missile test. And we didn't have anything yet. So it's been a month, a very quiet month. But this week we have a lot of events, very significant events. For example, South Korea and the U.S. a joint military exercise. And also Chinese Communist Party is going to have a Congress, a 19th Congress. So a lot of people are saying that maybe North Korea is going to do another provocation in protest. What do you think, Professor Park?
First of all, I think training is not a good time for North Korea to make a provocation because South Korea and the United States is fully prepared. And secondly, I think that the Chinese event is that North Korea should try not to ruin because it is the only ally to North Korea. Most of all, I think that we need to keep in mind that dear little Kim Jong-un made his personal announcement on 21st of September that he would punish the United States with a kind of massive and unexpected way. I think so. He may have ordered to his staffs to develop a possible courses of actions for that retaliation. And I think we need to keep in mind that striking the United States is very difficult for North Korea to decide because if it strikes the territory or mainland of the United States, U.S. will retaliate with massive firepower and it would terminate North Korea. So North Korea should make a balance between the risk and the keeping the promise. So I think that military is in the course of developing many options and recommend and develop more kind of options, and so I think they are waiting for the opportunity and waiting for their options fully mature to implement.
I see. Well, the U.S. actually dispatched the strategic military asset in a large scale, which is, I think, the rare case. But would it be effective to prevent North Korea's another provocation?
Well, U.S. may hope so, but then I just came back from China and I met with some people who actually visited North Korea and came back and talked with some of the people there. And I think we should understand the mentality of North Koreans. North Korea is a country when the military generals will go to war when Kim Jong-un said you should go to war, despite the fact that they fully know that this will be the consequence with the self-destruction of North Korea. So North Korea is a such country, and they are so isolated from the outside world that they have this habit of saying that they told me that if U.S. attacks us, let's die together, because for the glory of our dear leader. So this is very self-destructive way of thinking that we have a hard time understanding, but then this is the reality that we also should understand. So when we engage in these mass military drills, we should anticipate the consequences, and we should send out enough signal of deterrence, but then we also hope that things doesn't get out of control. I think there should be a line of wisdom there.
But it's not a declaration of war, just sending the military assets to the region. So I don't know. From the North Koreans' perspective, I don't really think that they have too much incentive to go to the ultimatum in this case, or go another provocation. So what do you think, Professor Park?
Yes, you're right. I think that there's a strong police presence. I think the criminals should not want to make crimes. It is a kind of principles of the deterrence. The principle of deterrence is, I think that we need to have capability to retaliate if the other guy provokes, and secondly, we need to have the strong will to do whatever we think necessary to retaliate for the punishment, and thirdly, I think that we need to make the other guy or the enemy know that we have that kind of capabilities and the will, and the strong presence, the presence of strong U.S. military might on and around the Korean Peninsula is a very good way and effective way for this deterrence. But the problem is that we cannot keep that kind of strong presence all the time. It is very costly. That's why that some South Korean experts ask the United States to deploy U.S.'s nuclear weapons onto Korean Peninsula.
Tactical nuclear weapons.
Yes, you're right. So the difficulty we have is that how to keep the U.S. strategic assets on and around the Korean Peninsula. It is not an easy thing.
I see. Well, amid these tensions, North Korea recently resurrected its policy line on self-reliant economy rehabilitation. So does it mean that the economy sanctioned by international community is working?
Well, self-reliant economic, the line that North Korea is pursuing is not something new. Actually, they used to rely heavily on China for up to 90% of what they need for livelihood and also oil and food. But the people who visited North Korea and coming back, they're saying that North Korea is more like an economy is developing. They used to see all the supermarket, all the Chinese goods, but now they're replaced by North Korean-made goods. So whether we like it or not, the reality is that North Korea's own economy is developing, so they are less dependent on outside the economy. That's why North Korea is self-reliant. And the implication is that North Korea is probably, unfortunately, ready for long-term standoff with the United States and other powers who do not want to see North Korea continue its nuclear program. So this is something to be worried about.
Yeah, even though North Korea managed to develop nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles under this kind of economic hardship, I think that North Korea may meet some kind of limitations and difficulties, because if you want to make a hydrogen bomb more and ballistic missiles more, I think you need to have some kind of very sophisticated and very advanced material and spare parts. It is not easy for North Korea to make on its own. So if we continue to pressure on North Korea on economic sanctions, by economic sanctions, I think we will have eventually some kind of positive effects. However, there's one kind of loophole, that is the Chinese cooperation. If China fully cooperates with United Nations, I think that we will have that kind of positive effects sooner rather than later. But as we have witnessed, China is a little reluctant to kind of continue this kind of strong pressure, so we are a little concerned. So I would like to ask the international society, it may be, we don't know, but we may be very close to the North Korea's limitation or ceiling to develop its nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles. So we need to continue, and at the same time, I think that international society should ask China to fully cooperate.
You just mentioned about China factor. I mean, Trump once mentioned that either with or without China's help, we will solve North Korean issue. And I think Trump should try without China approach now, because I think China is increasingly seeing North Korea as a problem, but not as an enemy. China sees North Korea still as a useful buffer zone against United States. So I think the 25 years of our effort to try to solve North Korean issue, and for the last 10 years of using China as an inducive, consentive tool, main tool to resolve North Korean issue, is a failure. Now I think U.S. should solve that problem. See, North Korea is your own issue, so you should cooperate with, work with us. But China's perception is totally different. China's perception is that, look, we have countries surrounding us. Pakistan has nuclear weapons, Russia has nuclear weapons, India has nuclear weapons. Just having one more nuclear weapons country is not a problem per se. Just like Canada is not worried about the United States having a massive nuclear stockpile. What kind of relationship we have with North Korea is the key. So this mentality is really underappreciated by outsiders, strategists who approach using the China card to solve the North Korean issue.
I see. Okay, well, we brought a nuclear deal and everything, and President Trump actually announced that he will not certify, so he decertify the Iran nuclear deal.
I am announcing today that we cannot and will not make this certification. There are also many people who believe that Iran is dealing with North Korea. I am going to instruct our intelligence agencies to do a thorough analysis and report back their findings beyond what they have already reviewed.
I mean, technically speaking, it's called a Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. And the fate of Iran nuclear deal is in the hands of Congress right now. So how do you see, and what's the intention of President Trump to sending the ball to the Congress side?
As we all know that instead of scrapping the agreement by himself, I think he
could have destroyed
it. Yes. He asked Congress to decide, and he want to have a 3 more months to think about. However, I think that I understand Trump's motivation. If Iran develops nuclear weapons, it would be, I think, the beginning of the Third World War with nuclear weapons. That means if Iran is very close to develop nuclear weapons, I think that Israel would kind of destroy that nuclear weapons and do not afraid of making any war. Or so I think that President Trump thinks that the agreement U.S. has with Iran cannot perfect to prevent the Iran to develop its nuclear weapons. So I think that he thought that it would be very necessary to give Iran that if you do not comply with this agreement, we will scrap the agreement. So Iran should had better keep the words in that agreement. I think it is one of the kind of common tactics or strategies President Trump used when he had some kind of business with other guys.
But according to IAEA, I mean, Iran has been abiding by the rule and the agreement quite sincerely and consistently. So what's the ground for decertifying it?
Yeah,
I mean, the only reason is, I think, is the ballistic missile test by Iran, but it's not a nuclear test.
I don't have much information as President Trump has, but I think he has some kind of intelligence that says that Iran may be very close to the real development of nuclear weapons. That means always we can kind of find some kind of ways to avoid the restrictions of the agreement, just we witnessed along on the North Korea. So I think that President Trump may have some evidence that if this continues, this status continues, someday Iran would detonate its nuclear weapons. I think he thinks that it is very important to prevent or to delay the occurrence of that kind of event.
Okay, I think this is the right time to listen to the opinions from our American expert. We have connected Alan Romberg, Henry L. Stimson Center in Washington, D.C. Hello, Mr. Romberg. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
So many question Trump's Iran decertification plan. And the fate of Iran nuclear deal is in the hands of Congress. So how does the U.S. respond to his decision?
Well, when you say the U.S., I think the American people are quite divided, frankly. I think they agree with Mr. Trump's criticisms of Iran as a terrorist state that is doing a lot of bad things in the region. But I think that those who know anything about the nuclear agreement, which was, of course, very narrowly drawn in order to deal only with the nuclear weapons issue, and only for a period of time during which presumably one could address it in a longer-term framework, those people don't like what he's doing. And I think that they feel that he could disrupt a really serious effort that not only involves the United States, of course, it also involves several other major countries. And it would, I think, as most critics are saying, free Iran up to resume its nuclear program without any penalty. And so I think Americans, as a general matter, are uneasy about it, although they do share his suspicion of what Iran, generally speaking, is up to.
So some pundits say Trump's statement might have a negative effect on North Korea's nuclear crisis. So what's the standard explanation for his intention to decertify the deal?
I'm not sure that he sees a connection. But if he does see, I think a lot of us do, which is to say that if the U.S. strikes a deal and then feels it can pull out of the deal, that will create a very bad situation for negotiation going forward if we ever get to negotiation with North Korea. My guess is that what he would say is, look, it was a bad deal to begin with. I don't negotiate bad deals. If I negotiate with North Korea, it'll be a good deal. It'll be one we can stick with. So I think if he makes a link, that would be the link he would make. The truth of the matter, of course, is that right now North Korea seems not interested in negotiating. I myself believe that the North certainly wants to acquire an intercontinental nuclear attack capability before it would even contemplate sitting down and talking about any limits on anything. So we have a ways to go before we see how the Iran situation might impact on North Korea.
I see. Well, thank you so much. That was Alan Romberg, Senior Associate at Stimson Center in Washington, D.C. So what do you think?
I changed my mind. I said there's some link between, when Trump talked about Iran, I said there's some link about North Korea. I think Alan is right, that Trump probably doesn't think about North Korea when he talked about Iran. Probably I overestimated Trump's here. But then I think there are really some differences between Iran and North Korean cases. For example, North Korea is a fully developed nuclear weapons. Iran is a developing state. North Korea is isolated. Iran is well fully connected with international finance system. So there are many things that are different, and there should be different approaches for Iran and North Korea, and these cases are two different separate cases. But then I think the message is that whether it's North Korea or Iran, I just it occur to my mind that it's been a while that U.S. has solved the international dispute in a peaceful manner, whether it's Libya or Iraq. And I think maybe it's necessary as the world superpower, U.S. should show, it's time to show a mature leadership, a capability, patient negotiation skills to resolve an issue like North Korea in a peaceful manner. I think this will set a good example and make people think twice and gain respect back to U.S. leadership.
But what's concerning here is President Trump's decision to decertify the deal actually send a signal to North Korea that even if they come to the negotiation table and make a deal, agreement, but there's no guarantee that next president, whoever that is going to abide by the agreement. So what's the use for North Korea to come to the negotiation table and make a deal?
I think that we need to remember that North Korea always broke the agreement, did not keep anything on the agreement. We made numerous agreements. For example, in 1994, agreed framework, and in 2005, the 9/19 agreement. But North Korea developed nuclear weapons in a clandestine way. In spite of that agreement, North Korea broke. And at the same time, I think that if Iran actually tries to develop its nuclear weapons and assume that President Trump has any kind of intelligence to support that, I think that this is very kind of a relevant decision for Trump to make, and it would give the North Korea that if you violate agreement when we have in the future, we will scrap it instantaneously, like you saw what I am doing to Iran.
But there's no hard evidence that Iran violated the agreement.
I don't think that U.S. presidents make this kind of decision without that kind of reliable intelligence. I don't think so.
Okay, well, let's wrap up our talk about October crisis in the Korean Peninsula. So what are your thoughts? So is something going to happen?
I always think negatively about the August crisis or October crisis.
Yeah, we've been having crisis every month.
Yes, you're right. That means that we think the kind of threat of North Korean nuclear weapons as a kind of game or some kind of events we can watch as a spectator. That means the North Korean nuclear problem is a life and death situation problem to us. The important thing is we need to be prepared against the worst case scenario all the time. And if there's some kind of gaps between the possible threats and our preparedness, we need to try to fill the gap. That is I think, the right attitude we need to have instead of trying to make predictions that there will be something in this month or next month.
There was an April crisis scenario. There was an August scenario, September crisis, now October crisis. We see the trend that, the tension is building up. Even though U.S. Basic approach to solve North Korea is to peacefully resolve the issue, but then we also hear increasing discussions about using military options. And the option is something that hit my head, because for the last 20 years, U.S. claimed to have used up all the options. And I just thought about that. There are two options that U.S. have not used. One is the military option. The other one is what Trump mentioned, sitting down with Kim Jong-un over hamburger.
Would you speak to the leader of North Korea? I said, absolutely. Why not? Why not? Who knows? There's a 10% or a 20% chance that I can talk him out of those nukes, because who wants him to have nukes? And there's a chance.
And there's a chance.
So we have to choose between hamburger and military option. And Trump has been using all other options. And in the end, Trump may be able to justify that. Look, I want to solve this issue peacefully, but I used up all other options. There is only one option left on the table, that is the military option. So I don't want to choose this, but maybe I have to. This is the only thing left. And there should be someone who rushed to Trump. Trump, you have not used the hamburger option. Use hamburger. Maybe that's cheaper and easier. Maybe you can solve the issue. You know, it sounds like a joke, but I think we should always think outside the box and look at the issue from the unconventional way. Maybe that is helps the situation, particularly when we think that there is no other way to solve North Korean issue other than, attacking or engaging, waging a war against North Korea.
All right. Well, Professor Park and Dr. Lee, thank you for sharing your insights with us today. And thank you all for staying with us. We'll be back next week with the hottest issues surrounding the Korean Peninsula. If you want to find out what's happening in and around the Korean Peninsula, tune into the Peninsula 24. Thanks for watching.